لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This evening, inshallah ta'ala, before I get started, I just wanted to take a moment just to thank everybody for showing up and, of course, extending the invitation. It's a pleasure of mine to join you here and to share some ideas with each other and hopefully some healthy dialogue at the end. So my plan is first to ask, what's the time of prayer?
7:15.
So what time are we stopping for prayer? 7:30? And then what's the plan after that? Okay. So we have about 40 minutes or so, I guess. And I'll try to use that as efficient as possible and discuss some rules of engagement, engaging the opposite gender, that is. But before I get started with a couple of thoughts that I jotted down here on my iPad, I just wanted to see a show of hands of the married folk in the audience. Anybody married? msoccny. Still, huh? Okay. Not a single person married? He is? Okay. One. Alright, then how many people here want to get married at some point? Come on, it's MSA, MSO, come on. It's a college crowd. How many of you find yourselves, your conversations are dominated by the talks of marriage and like, oh, I can't wait till I get out, get married and start a family? Yeah? Well, look, you don't have to raise your hand because I was in the MSA at one point in North Carolina when I was a student. And I don't know what the sisters were talking about, but I know that the brothers were talking about marriage. They're talking about girls. Yeah, it's real. And I've come to accept the fact that on college campuses, even within the Muslim societies and networks, that this is a very popular topic among the students. And even more so, I've come to accept and realize that a lot of times within our engagement, even with Islamic work, if you will, we have to deal with each other, men and women, and through the engagement of the opposite gender, we often find ourselves attracted to one another. And we may even have put our eye on someone in particular. And it may even be that the MSA knows, hey, that's his girl, or that's her guy. They're going to get married one day. And it actually happens sometimes that the MSA is a place where people eventually, they do get married. And I have had a couple of acquaintances over the past several years that it ended up that was the case. So, we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to be careful as well at the same time. So I wanted to open the session this evening with a story that was related by Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, one of the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is as reported in the collection of Imam al-Hakim al-Bayhaqi. So he says that between the time of Nuh and Idris, there was 1,000 years. And during that time, there was a group of people. One of the groups, they lived in the valley, and the other group lived in the mountains. So you have like the mountain people, and then you have like the country folk. He says the mountain men were very handsome, whereas the ladies of the mountain, not so much. Whereas the opposite was true for the people in the valley. The women were very beautiful, and the men were less attractive. He says, so one day Iblis, he came in the form of a man to the people of the valley. He came as a young man, and he basically offered his services like for hire, like a day laborer. He offered himself as a day laborer, and someone hired him. And while he was working, he took one of the tools that he had, and he began to beat on it or manipulate it in a way that it created a sound, like a melodious sound, like a musical instrument of sorts. And this was something that the people of the valley, they had never heard before. And because of that, it brought out such feelings of I guess, excitement. Right? When you see music being played, there's a very interesting response. And if you look at children, young babies even, that they're able to move and hold themselves up, and when you start playing a little, even just a rhythm, you'll find that the child will begin to kind of sway and rock and bounce up and down with the rhythm. And it's something that there's something very natural about it. And so with this introduction, the people of the valley, they decided, after, becoming overwhelmed with this type of a thing, something that they had not heard before, they decided to take it as a celebration. A yearly celebration where they would get together and the women would beautify themselves from the men. So remember, the women of the valley were very attractive. And they were getting dressed up and getting dolled up, if you will, to display their beauty to the men of their community. And they said the men would do the same to the best of their ability. Of course, they're working with a handicap, right? Maybe they put on the nice outfits and washed up, perhaps. And then they would, as it goes with the music playing, the party, and the celebration, they would kind of display themselves one to the other. So it was said that somebody from the mountain, one of the men, one of the strong mountain men, strapping, beard, I'm sure, mountain men always have beards, handsome, masculine. He came down to the valley, kind of crashing the party, if you will. Didn't come for the party, but stumbled across the party. And he saw the ladies. He saw the beautiful women. Remember, in the mountain, the women, they were not very attractive, whereas the men were very handsome. And now he's exposed to not only beautiful women, but women that are dolled up, dressed up. They look fancy. They have put on their best, or maybe they have removed their best to show themselves off. And so he, the mountain man, overwhelmed with this beauty, he went to get his friends. He has to share. Right? At least he was thinking of others. He went to his friends and he told them about what he saw. And so they all diverted direction. Whatever they were doing that day, they stopped to head down to see these beautiful ladies. They went down there, And he says here, when they went down there, so now you have a situation where the men, having not been exposed to such beauty, and the women the same, have not been exposed to such handsome men. And at that point is when the very lewd and lowly, illicit behavior began. And also final mentality, he says in the Quran, this is where they get the story from, وَلَا تَبَرُّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. And do not make a display of yourself like the display of the ignorant ones before. Do not make a display of your adornments, your beauties, like the ignorant display of the people that came before. So the people that came before, it's talking about this story. And this is where we begin, is dealing with the very natural response that we have with the opposite gender. Men are attracted to women, and women are attracted to men. And this is obviously for a very, very understandable purpose. One of the aims of the Islamic law is to protect and preserve progeny, offspring, to continue the human race. And so there's some natural elements at work that you are attracted to her, and that you are attracted to him. And the idea is through that strong attraction. Listen, the reason that I started with who's married here, because if you're married, you've lived with someone, you know how difficult living with someone is, regardless of how beautiful they are. How difficult it may be and how many sacrifices you have to go through in order to maintain a long-distance or a long-term relationship. And so, sometimes it seems that maybe even the attraction is not enough to hold a person together, but there is something that is inherent within us that calls us to want to be with the opposite gender. But Islam is a faith of morals and manners, etiquette, morality, of high standards of living. And so there are manners that must be observed when dealing with one another, meaning the opposite gender. If the manners are not observed, and the etiquette is not adhered to, the law, the code of conduct between men and women, then we end up much like the first people that displayed themselves to one another, where illicit behavior became widespread. And this should sound very familiar to us. And the results of that behavior are very clear. I'll give you some of those results to ponder upon as an intro. It says, according to 2001 UNICEF survey, in 10 out of 12 developed nations with available data, more than 2/3 of young people have had sexual intercourse while still in their teens. 2/3 while still in their teens. It's a lot. In Denmark, Finland, Germany, Iceland, Norway, the United Kingdom, and the United States, the proportion is over 80%. Not 2/3. 80% while still in their teens. Young people. People in our culture today, we're not talking about the old days where teenagers were mature and they got married and they began their life, but teenagers today in the Western world are very immature people. You remember the decisions you used to make when you were in your teens. I can remember some of them myself. Now that we've breached the teen years and are in our 20s and 30s, when we look at teenagers today, we think, man, what are they doing? Unable to live with the outcome of many decisions that are made. Some of those are right here. It says in Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States, approximately 25% of 15-year-olds and 50% of 17-year-olds have had sex. CDC published a study in 2013 which stated that 40.6% of births in the United States were from unmarried mothers. 40.6% of births were from unmarried women. That should be alarming to not just our community, but to the people of the United States, the people of this country. That should be alarming because it's not the time or place, but when you look at the outcome of such loose behavior and what I would consider irresponsibility, it is unfair to the child to grow up without a family. And there are plenty of studies that show how unfair that is for a child to grow up without a family, a father, without structure. It's very difficult, and the people that have gone through that experience can tell you firsthand. If you have anyone that you're acquainted with, or are friends with, or maybe family members that have grown up in such an experience, they have firsthand insight into how difficult that can be. Not to mention the behavior, this illicit behavior, it destroys honor and dignity. It's causing enmity and warring. It promotes the spread of adultery and fornication. It leads to sensual deviancy. Right? We wonder, like today, such strange, deviant, sensual, deviant behavior. It's at the click of a mouse you can find this. Don't look for it, of course. But you'll find the most disgusting, foul, humiliating acts in the name of sensuality. It begins somewhere. That's not the baseline rule of thumb that someone enjoys, and this is an adult audience, I come with them a lot, to be urinated on. They enjoy that as part of their sensual experience with the opposite gender. Or the same. This has a beginning point. It has a point where it jumps off, and this is where it begins. Illicit relationships, meaning outside of marriage, irresponsible relationships. It prevents procreation. A person may say, well, how? You just quoted us statistics. 40.6% of children are born without fathers. That's from an illicit relationship. How does it prevent procreation? Meaning to continue the human race. Because the intent behind the act was not to bring a child into the world. When two people hook up, they're not saying, hey, let's have a baby tonight. That's not the intent. But often it is, do you have protection? If not, there's the morning after pill. If not, there's the clinic down the road. So we can get rid of the problem. That's how it prohibits procreation. Prohibits the continuation of the human race. But all it does is cater to animalistic desires. Animals that do that. Act on instinct. Just going around and mating with anything that presents itself to them. And And it also takes a tremendous toll on the human spirit. It takes a tremendous toll on the human heart. One of the greats, I was just speaking to someone about this great Imam of the past moments ago, If you're familiar with him, then you know his status in Islamic history and his contribution to the scholarship of our faith. And much of what he contributed had to do with matters of the heart. He says that there is no sin that corrupts the heart worse besides murder than illicit relations, than illicit sexual behavior. He says there is something very, very particular about it which distances the heart from Allah. It's from the worst and lowliest acts. It says there's no action which corrupts after killing greater than its corruption. The corruption of engaging in illicit relationships. In particular, engaging in sexual behavior of the opposite gender. He says, and for that reason, because of its corruptive nature, a lot of people are, like in the news you see now, they're talking about the law of Islam, the crime and punishment and those types of things. It's heinous, it's barbaric, it's backward, it's not suitable for today's society. In Islamic law, if you're familiar with some of it, then you know that the one that fornicated, the adulterer, the fornicator and the adulterer, the punishment for the crime is very severe. And it is carried out in one of the worst ways because it matches with the nature of the crime. It doesn't go above and beyond, but it's just and suitable. So I say, perhaps it's suitable for all times and places. Because we as human beings are as we were. The story of the people of the mountain and the valley, it's our story today. Is it not? Is it not our story today? Friday night, it's time to get right. College life. That carries on, by the way, after college. I guess adult life. It's not just Friday night, it's every night for some. After 5 p.m., what happens? What's that? Go team! What's that? It's a fist bump, yeah. But what happens at 5 p.m.? People get off work, and a good, healthy portion of our communities, where do they go? They go to the bar. They go out. On the weekends they go to the club, and then when they go to the club, what do? They get dressed up to present themselves to the opposite gender. I don't care. Listen, I don't care how hard a person tries to convince themselves, I'm dressing like this for me. I'm dressing like this for me. I don't care about anybody. Listen, most of the stuff, it just appears very uncomfortable. When I'm dressing for me, I'm dressing comfortable. I don't know about you guys. When you go home at night and you get ready for bed, you're dressing for yourself, for comfort, to relax. What do you put on? You put on strings and stuff? High heels? Man, I feel for women when they have to wear the high heels. I really do. My ankles hurt. My calves are sore. I don't know, I heard it causes terrible back pain. Toes crunching up, getting little calluses. You gotta sand those things down. You got all kind of problems with those heels, man. But and from what I understand, and there are ladies here that probably know more about this than I do, but from what I understand is that the high heel shoe was designed not by a woman, but was designed by a man.
It was for men originally.
For men. Originally.
Yes.
It was for men.
Yes.
That they wore the high heel?
Yes.
And then the woman got it passed on. They must have realized how hard it was and how beautiful the leg looked. They said, "MashaAllah, look at my legs. The calf is just so defined." Yeah. Anyway, the point is that Ibn al-Qayyim is drawing our attention to the terrible corruption that it brings about. He says that, and this may be a shocker to some people, especially in our time and place, he says that if a servant, meaning a servant of Allah, knew that his wife, one of his women folk, was murdered, it would be easier for him to accept than if he was told she committed adultery. It would be easier for him to accept than if he was told she committed adultery. How can we qualify that in our tradition? It was reported that Sa'd ibn Ubadah, radiallahu anhu, one of the companions, he said, لو رأيت رجلا مع امرأتي لضربته بالسيف غير مصطع. That if I saw a man with my wife, I would strike him with my unsheathed sword. Meaning, I would kill him. That was told to the Prophet ﷺ. Someone told that to the Prophet because perhaps they're thinking, wow, what is this guy who's on his rocker? The Prophet ﷺ, he says, تعجبون من غيرة سعد. Are you astounded? Are you dumbfounded by Sa'ad's jealousy? He says, Wallahi la ana aghyaru min. He says, I swear by Allah, I am more jealous than he. Wallahu aghyaru minni. And Allah is more jealous, if you will, than me. He says, وَمِنْ أَجْلِ غِيرَةِ اللَّهِ حَرَّمَ الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. And due to that, ghira, which is a type of honorable jealousy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited al-fawahish, illicit behavior. That which is public and that which is private. You know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that the appearance and public display of adultery is from the signs of the world's destruction. He said, it is from the signs of the world's destruction. He says, min ashraf as-sa'a, that the signs of the hour, and yurfa al-ilm, that knowledge is removed. وَيَظْهَرَ الْجَهْلُ, that ignorance becomes widespread. وَيُشْرَبُ الْخَمْرُ, alcohol is consumed. وَيَظْهَرَ الزِّنَا, adultery becomes public. Adultery becomes public. For most of us, adultery is in our homes. Adultery for most of us is in our pockets, if we're not careful. This device, the one in front of me, the one that you have in front of you or in your pocket in your house, publicizes it for us. Whether it's premium TV, now Family Time TV, whether it's the paid TV, if you understand my meaning, surfing the web, you will find adultery and fornication publicized to the point that it's being crammed and rammed down our throats. Open your email. Spam. Check the spam. Go on Twitter if you have a Twitter. I just started a Twitter, by the way. Better be following me on Twitter. When I'm tweeting, you better be hearting that stuff. Forwarding, sharing is caring, brothers. Share them tweets. So since I just started with Twitter, I had a friend tell me, I've been maintaining a Twitter account for a while now. And an Instagram, I also started that on the Insta. He said, these two, but in particular Instagram, because that's the pictures, they post all these pictures. He says, will introduce pornography to you on a daily basis. People trying to friend you, add you, send you stuff, and a lot of what's out there is pornographic, adulterous, illicit. From the signs of the hour, from the signs of the world's destruction. This is the real deal, folks. And we as a community of faithful people, believers, we believe in Allah, we believe in the last day, we believe in the resurrection, we believe in the weighing of deeds, we believe in account and justice. We have to deal with this. We have to navigate our way, especially as minorities. We have to be able to navigate our way through this. Whether it's on college campus, in your neighborhood, in the mall, wherever you are. And then after that, when you go into the workplace and you're starting your career and you're beginning after graduation, you have to be able to navigate your way through. Listen, I've come to the conclusion that if, at the very least, we try to minimize regret. Minimize regret. So I was going to pick up diapers for my little baby girl. Oh, yeah, that's right. The man of the house, I was getting the diapers. Because my little baby girl is my little princess. And so I'm sitting outside of the pharmacy where I pick up the diapers, and something came over me. I was in the middle of a conversation online with an old friend of mine. We were in school together. And when we were in school together, I was yet married, but he had kids. And his kids were 6, 7, or 8. And he was telling me, I'm getting ready to go back home because my kids are going into college. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. It was like one of those moments, aha moment. Thinking, man, I remember those little kids. They were so cute, running around his house, running in and out when we were having tea and talking about whatever. Now they're going off to college, and I'm sitting in front of the pharmacy thinking, I'm going to buy my daughter diapers. Tomorrow, I'll be buying my granddaughter diapers, inshallah. Time, man, is just flying. It's flying by. It's flying by. And then I started thinking about myself, the years that passed, the things that I did and the things that I didn't do, the wrongs, all that. We have to try and minimize that so that there's no regret, or at least the regret is as few and far between as possible. So the decisions that we make now, we're going to have to deal with them later on. That's just the way it works. And there's something about not being able to turn the clock back that is so painful at times. If I could only go back and do that over again, I would have just done it differently. I've made a different decision. I realize now the mistake. And so this is the problem that we have in our community. I don't want to talk about the others because they have their own list of problems that they deal with. But our community is that a lot of times the young people do not want to learn from the guidance they've been given. but they are too stubborn and have to learn it on their own. That's not for me. That's not real. Do you know why there's so many stories in the Quran? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed these stories of the previous nations, what they did, what happened to them, their wins and their losses. It wasn't for entertainment factor. It was to be as a lesson for us. This is where they went wrong. Learn from that. Be smart enough to learn from the mistakes of others instead of being stubborn enough to have to make them on your own. And so in the guidance that we've been given as one of the greatest blessings of Allah again, is the guidance of manner and etiquette. How do we deal with each other? To avoid such tragedy and problems. First of all, we find that our Islamic law promotes marriage. This is the pinnacle of a relationship between a man and a woman, is in marriage. This is an agreement between a man and a woman by which they become permissible one to the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَىٰ وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ ذَلِكَ أَدْنَىٰ أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. And if you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one, and those who are in your captivity. That is more suitable for you, that you may not incline to injustice. Right off the bat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages the faithful to marry. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam likewise. And these ayat and hadith are familiar to a college audience such as yourself. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam among the young companions. As we were young companions, we didn't have anything. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, يَا مَعْشَرَ الشَّبَابِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ الْبَاءَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ. Whoever of you is able among the youth, then let them get married. فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ. It will help you lower your gaze. وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ. And preserve your chastity. To preserve your chastity. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ. And if you're unable to do that, then let them fast, for indeed it is a shield and a barrier. This report is Sahih Bukhari. By marriage, we preserve our chastity. This is one of 2 things the Prophet ﷺ has guaranteed paradise. To preserve one's chastity, the Prophet ﷺ has guaranteed paradise. The report in Sahih Bukhari on Sa'd ibn Sa'd. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Man yadmanu ma bayna lahyayhi wa ma bayna rijlayhi admanu lahu al-jannah." Whoever can guarantee for me what is between their jaws and between their thighs, then I will guarantee for them paradise. Between the jaws, one, and between the thighs. Here is your chastity. The second part. Marriage is the first step to preserving that second part. And as a matter of fact, it was reported the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ الْعَبْدُ فَقَدْ اسْتَكْمَلَ نِصْفَ دِينِهِ. If the servant were to marry, then they would have completed half of their faith. فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي النِّصْفِ الْبَاقِي. And he should fear Allah in the remaining half. We've heard this before, right? Marriage is half the deen. Brothers go get married, sisters get ready to get married. You're completing half of your faith. Do you know what that means? Completing half of your faith? The Imams of the past, they say, it means you've just guaranteed your chastity. What is between your thighs? Doesn't mean now my Iman is doubled. But it will certainly protect it from crashing due to a terrible mistake. So this is what it means to complete half of your faith. And he says, فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي النِّصْفِ الْبَاقِي. Fear Allah in regards to the other half. And that means what is between the jaws, meaning your loose lips. So marriage is first and foremost on our list of engagement. How do we engage with the opposite gender? If we want to engage with them, if we want to interact with them, then we marry them. That's a real relationship. It's dignified, it's responsible, it's above board, it's honest, it's public, it's open, it's valued, it's respected, it's honored. It's honored in the sight of Allah, and it's honored among the people. It's legitimate. If you want to engage with the opposite gender, you do it in legitimate ways. But marriage does not protect you from everything. Right? Our married brother here. Just love these little beads on the table. It's very nice. Our married brother. Anyone? No one else married? It doesn't protect you from everything. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, is reported in Sahih Bukhari, that Allah that Allah has prescribed for the son of Adam his portion of zina. Right? That's adultery. Even though in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He commands us, do not approach zina, do not approach adultery. He says, أَدْرَكَ ذَلِكَ لَا مَحَالَ. You will experience it, there's no escape. You will experience it, there's no fleeing from it. Your portion of adultery has been recorded for you. لَا مَحَالَ. He says, فَالْعَيْنُ تَزْنِي وَزِنَاهَا النَّظَرُ. The eye, it commits adultery, it fornicates. And its adultery and fornication is the look, the gaze, the once over, twice over. This is what he said, yazni, وَزِنَاهُ النُّطْقُ. That the tongue, it commits adultery and fornication, and it's through speaking. Looking and speaking. Original testing was inaha al-khata. That the leg, the foot will commit adultery, and that is the steps that it takes. Pursuing after the object of desire. It says, وَلْيَدْهَزْنِي وَزِنَاهَا الْبَطْشِ. And the hand that will fornicate, and its fornication is the touch. وَالْقَلْبُ يَهْوِي وَيَتَمَنَّى. The heart, it desires and it dreams. Right? وَالْفَرْجُ يَصْدِقُ ذَلِكَ أَوْ يُكَذِّبُ. يُصَدِّقُ ذَلِكَ أَوْ يُكَذِّبُ. And it is the private parts that will either make all of that true, will validate all of that, the eye, the tongue, the ear, the foot, and the hand, will validate all of that adultery, or it will invalidate and deny it. This is the reality of our world. And the beauties of Islam, and its beautiful qualities, is that it addresses reality as it is. Islam addresses things as it is. We're not dealing in hypotheticals with the Islamic law. Yes, we should be able to control ourselves. We should be able to wear whatever we want, when we want, act how we want, do as we want, and not meet unwanted and desired catcalls. We should be able to walk down the street at night on the rough side of town without fear. We should be able to do that, but that's not real. Those are delusions. Islam deals with the reality of man. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and He knows us. He knows our inclinations. our tendencies and our desires, and He knows what is best suited for them to help maintain society and keep us in order. So a couple of the manners, and this is very important, and this is a reminder for most of you, is lowering the gaze. We began, he says, another. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, وَالْعَيْنُ تَزْنِي وَزِنَاهَا النَّظَرُ. The eye commits adultery and fornication when it looks. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us in the Quran. This is in Surah An-Nur. Tell the believing men to lower their gaze, to reduce some of their gaze, and to guard their private parts. That is pure for them. Indeed, Allah is acquainted with what they do. The following verse, number 31, similar. Tell the believing women to reduce some of their vision, lower their gaze, and guard their private parts, and not expose their adornment except that which necessarily appears thereof, and wrap a portion of their head covers over their chests, and not expose their adornment except to, and Allah mentions the father and the son and the al-maharim, those that are unmarriable. To lower the gaze, the Prophet ﷺ, he told Ali radiallahu anhu, as reported by the Imam Ahmad, Ya Ali la tatba' an-nazara tan-nazar. Says, don't let one look be followed after the other. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ الْأُولَى فَإِنَّ لَكَ الْأُولَى وَلَيْسَتْ لَكَ الثَّانِيَةِ. He says, the first one you're pardoned for, but the second one is blameworthy. The Prophet ﷺ, he says before in Sunnah Tirmidhi, al-mar'atu awra. The woman, all of her is private. فَإِذَا خَرَجَتْ اسْتَشْرَفَهَا الشَّيْطَانِ. When she goes out, the shaitan tempts her and tempts others by her. The Imams of the past talk about the realities of this. And women may be able to identify this, it may resonate, but the men it resonates most. You don't have to raise your hand for this. Don't raise your hand, actually. But we'll be real for a moment. You're walking along, thinking about your paper that's overdue or your exam you have to cram for, and something catches your eye. You're going, dang! What did I just see? It can't be the most beautiful woman in the world on campus. Let me check it again. And then you go, dang, that's terrible! Yeah, come to your face. Oh. Resonates. What you thought was the most beautiful woman in the world was an average woman. Just as average as you. But she was beautified in a way that's not real. Much like the adverts that we see, the billboards, the magazines, TV shows where they have women, they airbrush up and they Photoshop. Man, Photoshop so much it doesn't even look like the woman in the photo shoot. And they have set for us men a terrible standard for our women folk to meet. So you thought this was the Mrs. Universe because she was beautified. Some traditions, they say that when the woman goes out, there's a shaitan on top of her, beautifying her front. So when you walk by her, it appears as if she's beautiful. And then there's a shaitan on her backside to beautify that as well. So when she walks by, you go, whoa! And you turn to look again. So you get the first look, and you're drawn to the second look. So this is the eye which fornicates. So even when a person lowers their gaze, this is the real deal. We have a few minutes left, right? Good. The real deal is that even though when you lower your gaze and you're trying your best to be modest in the way that you look around, you run into things. I mean, you can't close your eyes. So there's the next step is to maintain moderate and modest dress. To be modest in the dress, because you're going to see each other, you're going to run into each other. Otherwise you run into the wall or run out into the traffic with your eyes closed. Looking up at the sky is the only safe place now. You're like, look at this guy. Oh, look at the clouds, so beautiful today. His head is in the clouds. It's like, I'm just trying not to see the yoga pants everywhere. But to wear modest clothing. This is both for men and women. And in women in particular, because when you look at the men's clothing today, modern fashions, it's relatively modest. It's relatively modest. The men don't wear, well, it's starting to happen now. Men are wearing the very skinny, tight pants. Tight pants. This was a European thing for a long time. I learned this when I was overseas, that this was a European style. Because when I grew up, if you saw a man in those tight pants, you considered him a different type of man. In my day, a pant wearing, and I still wear them from time to time when needed. If you saw somebody in those tight skinny pants, you think, bro, it's laundry day, and you got your sister's pants? Or but the women's fashion, pop culture, is requiring them, pushing them to expose everything they have. To the point that I don't need to see what's under there. I already know. I know your size, your shape. If you're out of shape, I know. I know what undergarments you have on today. Minus color, and sometimes I even know that. Based on the style, I can see what's there. This is mind-boggling that we would subject ourselves, our women would subject themselves to such a thing. Listen to this for some perspective. Back in the day, by the Imams, the fuqaha, the jurists of our religion, they considered it makruh that a woman tie something tight around her garment, a belt. They didn't know about leggings. They didn't know about that. It was unheard of. Leggings. They were talking about a belt. They were wearing long, overflowing garments. Gowns they were wearing. It said it's makruh that a woman were to tie something around the waist of the belt, a belt or something, a cloth. It's considered makruh. Some said haram. They considered that tight clothing, even though it was something which if a woman prayed in would not invalidate her prayer. Something that was illicit, like clothed nudity. A belt, man, a belt on an abaya, kabira dress, cinched up at the top. Yeah, I know. I know these things. I have to know these things. Cinched up at the top. I mean, it's better than a lot. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot better than a lot of what's out there. Right? And hats off to the sisters that can maintain a certain level of modesty in their dress without being succumbing to the social pressure that they're under. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Sinfani min an-nar," and we'll conclude with this. Two types of people from the hellfire. He says, these two types, these are two types I've never seen. قوم معهم سياط كأذناب البقر يضربون بها الناس. People that have flogs like the tails of oxes, and with them they are beating the people. It says, وَنِسَاءٌ كَاسِيَاتٌ عَارِيَاتٌ مُمِيلَاتٌ مَائِلَاتٌ رُؤُوسُهُنَّ كَأَسْنِمَةِ الْبَخْتِ الْمَائِلَةِ لَا يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ. It says there are women who would be dressed but appear to be naked, who would be inclined to evil and make their husbands inclined towards it. Their heads would be like the humps of the bucked camel, inclined, leaning to one side. They will not enter paradise, and they will not smell its odors. He says, لا يوجد من مسيرة كذا وكذا, even though the odors can be smelt from such a long distance away. The scholars, they understood this. Nisa'un kasiyatun ariyat, clothed but naked, to mean tight apparel, tight clothing. And we'll stop here for prayer, and hopefully the Q&A session will bring to light some more issues and open the door for a healthy dialogue, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your attentive listening. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this life and the next. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.